In order to retrieve his first love, my husband forcibly extracted my memories. He firmly believed that her departure must have been forced by me. Ignoring my intense struggles, he forcibly bound me to the operating table. Past scenes flashed before his eyes frame by frame, his clenched fists had fingertips turning blue, and finally, he slowly squatted down, holding his head and sobbing. Impossible, this is impossible. Today marked the 7th day since Stephen's first love ran away from home, a full week. Stephen couldn't contact Veronica and was so anxious that he had already smashed 3 phones. The butler hurried into Stephen's office and whispered a few words in his ear. Stephen's eyes suddenly brightened, and he said with a face full of surprise, "Really? That's great." With that, he stood up and left, arriving at my room. I was tied up tightly on the bed, with glucose hanging from my right hand, and the bed was covered in excrement. Stephen, afraid I would starve to death, didn't give me food or drink but kept me bound to the bed like this, just to force me to reveal where Veronica had gone. But I truly didn't know. That day, I had just gone out shopping, and upon returning, I was informed that Veronica was missing, and she had left a farewell letter. The letter was filled with accusations of my dissatisfaction and bullying toward her, claiming I always gave her dirty looks, often bullied her when no one was around, fed her leftovers, spat in her teacup, and put blades in her shoes. After listing my faults, it conversely urged Stephen not to blame me. It was all because she moved into my home that I felt a sense of crisis, fearing she would take Stephen away, which led me to oppose her. She said she just wanted to leave for a faraway place and asked Stephen not to look for her. Between the lines, it implied that I couldn't tolerate her, bullied her, and she had to leave. Stephen, fearing Veronica might do something drastic, stepped forward and grabbed my neck, sternly asking, "Where did Veronica go?" I was choked to the point of breathlessness, my throat in excruciating pain, and could only scratch at Stephen's arms nonstop. Stephen threw me to the ground and stepped on my head, viciously saying, "If anything happens to Veronica, I'll make you pay with your life." To force me to reveal Veronica's whereabouts, he tied me to the bed, denying me food and drink, only administering glucose to keep me barely alive. Upon hearing that Dr. Raymond's memory extractor was ready for use, he hurriedly returned to send me there. I was transferred to a brightly lit laboratory room, where the glaring lights made it impossible to open my eyes. Cold iron restraints secured my hands, feet, and neck, and a helmet filled with various tubes was fastened onto my head. This was a memory extractor. Once I wore this device and Stephen wore another helmet, he could see the scenes from my memories through it. This was the laboratory's latest research product, originally intended for extracting criminals' memories, but now it was being used on me first. An elderly man with white hair, wearing a white lab coat and holding a tablet, approached. He first glanced at me, then his gaze fell on Stephen's face. "Is this your wife, Stephen?" Stephen glanced at me with disgust and said, "Not anymore." "Are you sure you want to extract the memories, Stephen? This device has just been developed and is not very stable yet. Problems may occur during the extraction, such as amnesia, cerebral palsy, or..." He paused and glanced at Stephen's expression. Stephen waited expressionlessly for Dr. Raymond to continue. Dr. Raymond sighed, "And there might be death." Upon hearing death, my heart trembled violently. Actually, for me now, death might be a release. I longed for death too much. Rather than being tortured by Stephen like this, it would be better to die quickly. Stephen paused upon hearing death. He then strode over to me and grabbed my throat. "I'm asking you one last time, where did Veronica go?" It had been 7 days. Veronica left her phone in the room, there were no transaction records on her bank card, and she didn't even have any familiar friends in this city. Where could she have gone? I tried hard to recall the last time I had contact with Veronica. Right, it was my birthday. For that birthday, I had originally planned to have dinner with Stephen. Since Stephen liked the cakes I made, I started busying myself from noon, making cake and dishes, preparing a full table, just waiting for Stephen to come back and celebrate with me. But I waited from evening until dawn, and Stephen didn't return. During that time, I called him countless times and sent numerous messages, all without response, like stones sinking into the sea. Just as I gave up and prepared to wash up and sleep, Stephen called back. I excitedly answered, but the person speaking was Veronica. She said, "Sorry, Ariana, Stephen is with me in H City. I really wanted to go to Disneyland, so I asked Stephen to accompany me. I didn't know today was your birthday, really sorry. How about this, we'll come back tomorrow and make it up to you, okay?" Because of this, I had a big argument with Stephen. He said indifferently, "It's just a birthday, you have one every year. What's wrong with skipping this one? Besides, Veronica already explained to you, she didn't know it was your birthday. We even brought you a gift when we returned. What more do you want?" Yes, what more could I want? Ever since Veronica returned, Stephen had never fulfilled his promises. He always ran off to find Veronica at our agreed times, once, twice, 3 times, every time like this. I still remember the last time it rained heavily. I called Stephen to pick me up from work, and he said he'd arrive in 20 minutes. I waited like that until everyone at the company had left, until the neon lights outside the building were turned off, and finally, I received Stephen's call. "I'm picking up Veronica, she seems unwell. Take a cab back yourself." In stormy weather, how easy is it to get a cab? I stood in the wind and rain for an hour before finally getting one, and the next day, I developed a fever directly from getting drenched. After Stephen found out, not only did he show no apology, but he also called me pretentious. "It's just getting rained on, how could you get a fever? You're so useless." However, he was still very considerate, considerately bringing Veronica home. "Ariana, I brought Veronica home to live with us, so incidents like last time won't happen again." Veronica very familiarly stepped forward and hugged me. "Ariana, sorry about last time, I was on my period and had a stomachache, so I asked Stephen to pick me up. I didn't know he had already promised to pick you up first." She turned her head and reproachfully hammered Stephen's chest with her hand. "You too, since you promised Ariana first, you should have picked her up. You made her wait so long and even caused her to get a fever." Stephen looked somewhat embarrassed and simply said flatly, "She can take a cab back herself, you're more important." Upon hearing Stephen's words, Veronica's face instantly blushed slightly. She hammered Stephen's chest again. "Don't say that, Ariana will get jealous." Stephen glanced up at me. "Don't mind her." With that, he pulled Veronica's suitcase toward the guest room. From that day on, my nightmare began. Stephen pampered Veronica greatly. Whatever Veronica wanted, he gave her, accompanying her shopping, watching movies, going to amusement parks, and celebrating her birthday. He always told me to yield to Veronica, saying she had it tough being alone in such a big city with no friends or family, only him. Whereas I had friends here, a job, and him, making me much happier than Veronica. I found it ridiculous. Veronica having no friends meant she had poor social skills, and just because she couldn't make friends due to that, I had to yield to her. What kind of logic was that? I didn't plan to argue with Stephen over this. I thought that if I stepped back, we could each live peacefully. But Veronica didn't think so. She picked on me everywhere, provoking my anger and forcing me to lash out at her. Then, when Stephen arrived at the scene, she always managed to put on a weak and fragile appearance, making the whole world think I was bullying her. This idiotic and boring trick worked every time. Because no matter how lousy the tactic, Stephen would believe it. There was surveillance in the living room. After being framed several times, I asked Stephen to check the footage to see what the truth really was. But Stephen was blind in both eyes and heart. He never watched the surveillance, and even if he did, he thought it was all my doing. I was exhausted, truly exhausted. Actually, on the day Veronica left, I went out shopping to relax, originally planning to mention divorce to Stephen upon returning. Since he protected Veronica so much and feared she would be bullied by others, he could protect her himself. But before I could mention divorce, Stephen tied me up and interrogated me about Veronica's whereabouts. My silence made Stephen even more frustrated. His hand gripping my neck tightened further, and as my face turned blue and I was nearly suffocating, Dr. Raymond hurriedly stepped forward to pull Stephen away. "Enough, if you continue, she'll die." "Die? Not so easily." Before she dies, I need to know Veronica's whereabouts. Dr. Raymond looked at me lying on the bed gasping for air, shook his head, and said flatly, "Why bother?" The device was activated, and tingling currents flowed into my body. It was a bit uncomfortable but still bearable. Dr. Raymond brought a similar helmet and handed it to Stephen. "Put it on, you'll be able to see the memories in her mind." Stephen took the helmet without hesitation and put it on his head. The current gradually intensified, causing my body to tremble and convulse violently. 10 minutes later, my body stopped convulsing, and when I opened my eyes, I found myself back to the day Veronica had just come home. "Come in, from now on, treat this as your home." A familiar voice sounded from outside the door, and soon the door was opened, with Stephen leading Veronica in from outside. "Ariana, you're here. I thought you went to work." Stephen was somewhat surprised to see me. He turned to Veronica behind him and introduced her to me. "This is Veronica, my childhood friend, we grew up together." Veronica stepped forward very familiarly. "Ariana, really sorry, I didn't know last time you had asked Stephen to pick you up. He's like that too, didn't tell me. If he had, I definitely wouldn't have let him pick me up." As she spoke, she clenched her small fist and lightly hammered Stephen's chest. "Look at you. If not for you, Ariana wouldn't have gotten a fever and fallen ill." Stephen looked at Veronica with indulgence. "She can take a cab back herself. Getting a fever from rain shows her poor constitution. What does that have to do with me?" Stephen arranged Veronica in the guest room and then returned to the company. I was tidying up in the bedroom when Veronica leaned on the doorframe and knocked. I turned to look at her. She had a cigarette in her mouth, puffing smoke skillfully. "So you're Stephen's wife, that's all? No figure, no looks. I really don't know how Stephen fell for you." I turned back and continued tidying. "How he fell for me seems none of your business, right?" "Heh, it wasn't before, but now it is. Because soon, he won't belong to you anymore." Honestly, Veronica's words gave me a sense of crisis. After all, a woman Stephen would bring home was definitely not someone to be trifled with. I always wanted to find an opportunity to properly discuss Veronica with Stephen, but during that time, I had a project on hand and was busy until late every day before returning home. Stephen and I each had our own personal study. My study door was covered with Doraemon stickers to distinguish it from Stephen's. Right after we got married, Stephen always entered the wrong study and used the wrong computer. To prevent him from doing it again, I specially bought a bunch of cartoon stickers. Veronica didn't work and idled at home all day. She slept until she woke naturally, ate takeout, played games, shopped, slept, ate takeout. Or, she contacted Stephen to take her out. I, on the other hand, was busy with the project all day, working overtime until late every night, and continued working in the study upon returning. Veronica found it boring and sneaked into my study when I wasn't there, altering a few data points in my proposal. As expected, during the presentation, I was severely scolded by the boss. I wanted to explain that the data wasn't written by me, that someone had changed it, but what use was saying it? The boss had no time to listen to my explanation. After returning, I had a big argument with Veronica. "Did you sneak into my study and change my data?" Veronica crossed her legs, gnawing on an apple. She tossed the apple core at my feet casually. "So what if I changed it? You still want to get promoted with this project? Dream on." She suddenly smiled sweetly. "Ariana, why bother? Stephen earns enough money for you to spend in 2 lifetimes. Why do you still go out to work? Why not resign and stay home to take care of me? I'm tired of eating takeout every day." As she spoke, she stretched out her foot and kicked the spicy hot pot on the table to the ground. The greasy broth spilled all over the floor. She pouted, "Mop the floor. All you know is going to work every day, and the money you earn isn't even enough for one of my meals. Your value is staying home to clean. Do it now, let me see your worth." I stepped forward step by step, staring intently into Veronica's eyes. "Whatever you and Stephen do is fine, just don't interfere with my work." Compared to Stephen, I preferred work. After all, in the current environment, if a man is gone, you can replace him, but if a job is gone, it's not easy to find another. Veronica, for some unknown reason, suddenly slid to her knees, her body softly falling to the ground, her clothes all stained with the spicy hot pot broth. She looked at me with a pitiful, aggrieved expression. "Ariana, sorry, I'll go look for a job tomorrow, and once I'm settled, I'll definitely move out. Please don't drive me away." I was puzzled when I heard Steven's voice. "Ariana, what are you doing?" He rushed forward angrily, and upon seeing Veronica fallen in the spicy hot pot, he slapped me without question. That slap was strong and forceful, making one of my ears buzz for a long time. I looked at Steven in disbelief, only to see him gently step forward, carefully helping Veronica up, then turning to scold me angrily. "I told Veronica not to go out to work, it's so hot, what job? It's not like I can't support her." I laughed. "You support her? Who are you to her? You support her? We've been married for 3 years, have you ever supported me? Given me a single penny?" Steven sneered. "Back then, I told you to stay home as a full-time housewife, but you insisted on working, saying you're an independent woman. What now, begging me for money? Aren't you independent? Aren't you so capable? If you want to work so much, work to your heart's content, best if you die at your desk. Veronica is different from you, she's delicate and can't handle even a bit of work. Moreover, don't forget, this house is mine. I decide who lives here, making Veronica leave? It's not your turn to drive people away." Steven left with Veronica, leaving me standing there dazed, laughing until tears came down. Suddenly, everything went black, and I fainted on the ground. In my ears came Dr. Raymond's anxious voice. "Quick, turn it off, her body is starting to convulse." I, lying on the bed, convulsed violently, foam starting to form at my mouth. Dr. Raymond pulled a pill from his pocket and forced it into my mouth. Soon, I stopped convulsing, and my breathing returned to normal. Steven slowly opened his eyes, looking at me lying on the bed with a complex expression, muttering, Veronica is just a bit playful, and you took it seriously. But you were wrong too, why didn't you tell me? There's surveillance in the living room, if you had just told me, I could have checked it and known everything. All this is your own fault." Blame myself? Blame me for not telling him? If I told him, would he believe me? He would only think I was being unreasonable, that I was crazy. Dr. Raymond looked at the tablet in his hand, which displayed some strange data and images. "Steven, Mrs. Ariana's condition is not good, these memories are highly resistant to her. Do you want to continue? Will she wake up?" Steven's gaze fell on me. I lay quietly, as if asleep. Dr. Raymond tapped the tablet screen a few times with his finger, then nodded. "Logically speaking, there should be a 10-minute period of consciousness in about an hour." Steven rubbed his temples with his hand. "Then let's wait for her to wake up. I don't believe that after this, she can still hold back and not reveal Veronica's whereabouts." Less than an hour later, I woke up. My head hurt terribly, with piercing pain between each breath. My hands were bound, so I couldn't hit my head. Slowly opening my eyes, there were no glaring lights as I remembered, perhaps fearing I couldn't adapt to strong light, the lab lights had been changed to soft ones. The instruments bound to me emitted beeping alarm sounds. Dr. Raymond hurried in from outside, with Steven following behind. Seeing me awake, Steven's attitude softened a bit. "You've just gone through memory extraction, I know it must have been hard. So, can you tell me now where Veronica went? As long as you say it, we'll go home, and I won't restrain you anymore." I shook my head and said in a hoarse voice, "I don't know, even if you ask hundreds or thousands of times, I can only tell you I don't know." Steven's face immediately darkened, stubborn. Dropping these 4 words, he turned and left. I saw him and Dr. Raymond whispering something. I had a bad feeling, but no matter how bad, what could I do? I couldn't escape. At worst, it would be another shock. Thinking this, I slowly closed my eyes, waiting for the shock to come. Sure enough, soon my body started tingling again. The second memory extraction began. To make up for the error in the project data last time, I worked even harder. The boss agreed to let me compensate, and I would still present the next report. The night before the report, Veronica unusually knocked on my study door, holding a glass of milk. "Ariana, really sorry, last time it was my fault, I shouldn't have changed your data. I was just playing around, you won't take it to heart, right?" I originally didn't want to respond to her, but Stephen came in too, acting like a peacemaker. "Ariana, see, Veronica is apologizing to you, drink this milk and forgive her." With both saying this, not forgiving would make me seem petty. I took the milk and placed it on the desk. "I forgive you, now I need to work, so please leave." Hearing this, Veronica pouted aggrievedly and looked at Stephen. "Ariana still won't forgive me, what to do?" Stephen frowned. "Ariana, be sensible, Veronica has personally come to apologize. Drink the milk, and then you two can let bygones be bygones." I really didn't want to waste more time with them, so I picked up the milk and gulped it down. "Now, can you leave?" Seeing me finish the milk, Veronica smiled brightly. "Then we won't disturb you, Ariana." With that, she took the empty glass and left. The next day during my report, my stomach suddenly started cramping. At first, I could endure it, but it got worse, and I instinctively felt bad. It was the urge to go to the toilet. But with so many leaders watching below, I couldn't just say midway that I needed to go to the bathroom. But it seemed that soiling my pants during a meeting wasn't a good thing either. As I was hesitating, suddenly, pfft! All eyes fell on me. I couldn't control it anymore, my face alternating red and white, and I quickly bowed in apology. I couldn't hold it anymore, so I ran out while pfft. Social death is probably that simple. That morning, I went to the toilet 10 times, and finally, I collapsed weakly on the ground. It was a colleague who called 911 for me. Acute gastroenteritis, the doctor said I had eaten something unclean. I thought and thought but couldn't recall what I had eaten. Thinking back, I remembered the glass of milk Veronica gave me. Since I needed hospitalization and accompaniment, I called Stephen. Veronica answered. "Ariana, we're shopping, Stephen went to buy me ice cream." "What's up? Did you put something in the milk?" "Ha ha 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 ha." Veronica's laughter drilled into my ears. "Ariana, how was the effect?" "I heard from Stephen that you're under too much pressure and have difficulty going to the toilet, so I specially bought it for you. I heard you had to report today, it couldn't be, ha 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 ha." Veronica's laughter continued endlessly, laughing brilliantly. "Aren't you afraid I'll tell Stephen?" I gritted my teeth. "Go ahead, tell him, say I added laxative to your milk, see if Stephen believes you." "Ariana, I told you, you can resign. You go to work every day, and I'm bored at home alone." I was hospitalized for 2 days, Stephen didn't even visit once, nor did he call. He only sent a faint text of concern. "Don't eat random things next time. Take care of yourself." When I went to the company after discharge, I was informed that someone had resigned on my behalf. HR said, "He said he was your husband, that you worked overtime late every day for work and your body couldn't take it, so he resigned for you." "Ariana, we understand you, after all, last time in the meeting, cough cough." HR coughed lightly to cover the smile at the corner of his mouth. "Ariana, you still need to take care of your health." I was furious. I worked hard, refused to resign even after marriage, stayed up late for a project almost to the point of collapse without leaving. What right did Stephen have to decide for me, to resign for me? I stormed to Stephen's company, pushing aside the receptionist who tried to stop me. When I burst into Stephen's office, I saw Veronica sitting in Stephen's chair, with Stephen bending down carefully, doing something. "What are you doing?" My voice startled both of them. Stephen saw me, and his originally calm face took on a hint of anger. "What are you here for? You tell me first, what were you doing? Having an affair?" Veronica stood up from the chair. "Ariana, Stephen is cleaning my ears. A few days ago, when swimming with Stephen, water seemed to get in my ear." "Great, really great." His wife was in the hospital on 4 for acute gastroenteritis, and he was accompanying his first love swimming. Stephen was also angry. "What are you saying? You think everyone is like you, with such dirty thoughts. Moreover, didn't your mom teach you as a child? When cleaning ears, you can't move or speak loudly, you were so loud just now." What if I got startled and poked Veronica? I laughed. Then didn't your mom teach you to mind your own business? Who told you to resign my job for me? Veronica suddenly stepped forward to block Steven. Ariana, don't blame Steven, resigning for you was my idea. I thought you were too hardworking, overtime late every day, and still reporting while unwell. Steven has agreed, after you resign, he'll give you $20,000 a month for living expenses, same as me. Then we can stay home and play together, and when the weather cools, we can travel together. I turned to Steven hiding behind Veronica. So, you give Veronica $20,000 a month for living expenses? Steven, you said Veronica has nothing to do with you, yet you're keeping a mistress in front of me and bringing her home? Steven's face flushed red. Ariana, what are you saying? Veronica is just my childhood friend, she has no job or income now, what's wrong with me spending money on her? Besides, it's my money, I can spend it on whoever I want, you can't control that? The recollection ended here. I, lying on the bed, had tears streaming down my face, and eventually started sobbing quietly. Dr. Raymond glanced at the tablet in his hand and signaled the machine operator to shut it down. I had fallen into deep sleep, unable to wake easily, but I was very sad, crying continuously without stopping. Steven also came to, sitting on the bed in silence for a long time. Dr. Raymond stepped forward, choosing his words carefully. Steven, Mrs. Ariana has fallen into a coma. Unless forcibly awakened, she might never wake up in this lifetime. What do you think? Steven didn't speak, sitting dazed. Steven? Dr. Raymond waved his hand in front of Steven's eyes. Let's wait for now, Steven said. Okay. Steven took a while to recover, then slowly got up from the bed and walked to my bedside. I had stopped sobbing, with tears hanging at the corners of my eyes. Sorry, I didn't know she added laxative to your milk causing your diarrhea. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you just ate something bad. Sigh, you're just too poor at expressing yourself. If you were like Veronica, I wouldn't have misunderstood you so much. However, maybe Veronica really meant well. I told her you often had difficulty going to the toilet due to high stress and asked if she had any solutions. I thought girls would have better ways, but I didn't expect her to directly give you laxative. Don't worry, when she returns, I'll definitely talk to her. She's just too playful and loves to mess around, no bad intentions. You won't tell me where Veronica went because you're afraid she'll come back and take me from you, right? Actually, I don't like her, I like you. I just pity her, alone and helpless in this city, knowing only me, so I want to accompany her more. Didn't I tell you? As soon as the weather cools, she'll go look for a job, and once stable, she'll move out. Steven muttered beside me for a long time. I could vaguely hear his voice but couldn't make out exactly what he said. Steven seemed to be explaining for Veronica and also for himself. He kept talking until Dr. Raymond came to urge, Steven, do you want to continue? If not, I'll have to forcibly wake Mrs. Ariana. After waking, we can't extract memories again, it would kill her. Steven pondered for a moment and asked, then if we continue extracting without waking, will it kill her? Dr. Raymond hesitated. This machine is not yet perfect. Continuing extraction without waking might kill her, or might not, it depends on Mrs. Ariana's fortune. Steven sighed, then continue, we've already started, and I need to know Veronica's whereabouts anyway. Dr. Raymond opened his mouth too but still didn't speak. This time, I finally dreamed of Veronica's disappearance. Since Steven had resigned my job for me, I became unemployed and stayed home every day. Veronica would demand food as soon as she woke. Seeing I hadn't made any, she started mocking me sarcastically, then called Steven to complain. Steven, Ariana doesn't make food for me, she only makes her own. So Steven called to scold me, you stay home all day with nothing to do, just take care of Veronica. Just cook and clean the house, nothing else. I laughed bitterly. When I was working before, how could Veronica do nothing? Steven's explanation was, Veronica is an outsider, a guest, how can you make a guest do housework? But why give a guest living expenses? Steven fell silent. Veronica secretly booked plane tickets to N City for us, in the evening, she presented them as a surprise in front of us. Surprised? I bought them specially. Ariana, I've seen you've been in low spirits lately, it's time to go out and relax. Steven, you've been working overtime a lot lately, you need to relax too. Thus, under Veronica's sweet talk, Steven actually chose to put down his work and accompanied her to N City. To make Veronica comfortable, Steven borrowed a villa from his friend, it was fully equipped. Steven and I shared a room, Veronica had her own. Steven went to talk with his friend, I changed clothes and just came out of the room when I encountered Veronica, wearing a swimsuit, standing at my door as if waiting for me. Ariana, let's go find Steven together. Veronica kindly tried to pull my arm, but I instinctively dodged. There's no one here, what are you pretending for? I said. Ariana, what do you mean? I kindly invited you and Steven on this trip, yet you still have this attitude. Veronica looked at me pitifully, I really want to repair our relationship, believe me. I looked at her and sneered. Seeing she couldn't persuade me, Veronica sighed, fine, if you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. She turned toward the stairs, and suddenly there was a scream, followed by cries for help. Thinking something happened, I rushed downstairs, only to see Veronica lying on the ground unconscious, with Steven running over anxiously from the other side. Veronica was sent to the hospital, her right leg was severely sprained, and the doctor told her to lie down and rest for the next few days. When I went to the ward, I heard Veronica whining to Steven, Steven, don't blame Ariana, she definitely didn't do it on purpose. Steven gritted his teeth, how can this woman be so vicious? Such high stairs, pushing you down like that, doesn't she know that's illegal? I pushed the door open and looked at Veronica. She guiltily lowered her eyes, not daring to look at me. Didn't you say I pushed you down the stairs? Then report to the police, let them investigate. If I did, I'll go to jail. If not, I'll countersue you for slander. Veronica bit her lip without speaking, looking very afraid of me. Steven couldn't hold back, he pushed me, Ariana, that's enough. Veronica isn't holding it against you, what are you still fussing about? Do you have to make a scene at the police station, get arrested, to be satisfied? I nodded, yes, I want to make a big deal out of it, to show you that the woman you're protecting is a wolf or a sheep. Steven, unable to tolerate it anymore, slapped me directly. After the slap, he was stunned himself, for the next few days, take good care of Veronica honestly until her foot recovers. Of course, I didn't take care of Veronica, I was afraid I couldn't help but kill her. Because of this, Steven sulked with me and directly moved to Veronica's room to care for her. The next afternoon, Steven went out for something, I was in the room browsing job apps, thinking to look for work after returning, when Veronica knocked on my door. She sat smugly on the vanity chair, propping her feet on the vanity. Save your effort, Steven doesn't love you at all. If I just beckon, he'll come running to me. I say, he's disgusted with you like this. Why won't you divorce him? Yes, why wouldn't I divorce Steven? I was curious too, Veronica reminded me. Why live so miserably? Since Steven loves Veronica so much, let them be together forever. But I was unwilling, why should I yield? As long as I don't divorce, no matter how much Steven loves Veronica, she's just a mistress. Seeing me silent, Veronica snorted coldly, still refusing to face reality? Fine, then I'll make you face it. I'll show you how your good husband Steven goes mad looking for me after I disappear. Ha 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 ha. So, not long after returning from N City, Veronica disappeared. And Steven, as she wished, went crazy looking for her. The dream ended, I could no longer feel any pain, only feeling my whole body light and floating. The next second, I saw myself lying on the hospital bed. I realized I was dead. The instruments bound to me started beeping incessantly. Dr. Raymond hurriedly put down his tablet and began resuscitation. CPR, defibrillation, after a series of operations, all the nearby instruments showed only flat lines. Steven also woke up, his eyes full of tears, repeating in his mouth, impossible, this is impossible. How could Veronica be like this? This is impossible. All this is your fault, it's you, you didn't explain clearly to me, it's all because of you. He abruptly got up from the bed, and when he reached my bedside, he saw Dr. Raymond's hesitant face. Quick! Forcefully wake Ariana for me, quick! Dr. Raymond stood still. Stephen, as if mad, shoved Dr. Raymond. I told you to wake her for me. Sorry, Stephen, Mrs. Ariana has passed away. This is impossible. Didn't you say it was just a probability? How is she gone? This is impossible. Stephen slowly knelt on the ground, holding his head with both hands. So all this was Veronica's plan. She just wanted me to know how much Stephen loved her, then make me give up completely. But I loved Stephen so much, how could I divorce over this? Stephen returned home like a walking corpse. He pushed open the door to my study, the only place in this home that belonged solely to me. Stephen rummaged through the drawers for my personal items, but upon opening the first drawer, he saw a divorce agreement, dated the day Veronica left. Actually she wanted to divorce me long ago, It's me, all my fault, I didn't believe her. I deserve it, all my fault. Stephen slapped his own face repeatedly, crying and laughing. Suddenly, there was a knock outside, followed by the sound of entering the password. Stephen, are you home? A familiar voice came from the living room. Stephen got up to open the door and came face to face with Veronica. Upon seeing Stephen, Veronica hugged him tightly. Stephen, why didn't you come find me? It's been over a week, why didn't you come find me? To make Stephen unable to find her, Veronica deliberately didn't bring her phone, just some cash, and went to the countryside. Although country life was comfortable, having been accustomed to days with phones and air conditioning, how could she adapt quickly? Veronica thought, at most 3 days, in 3 days, Stephen would surely find her. But 3 days passed, then another 3, Veronica couldn't wait anymore. She bought a ticket and returned herself. Stephen let Veronica hug him until she released her arms and looked at him. Meeting Stephen's murderous gaze, Veronica felt something was wrong, but she didn't know what had happened. Stephen, why are you looking at me like that? Veronica asked. The data in Ariana's proposal, was it you who secretly changed it? Stephen asked. Veronica didn't speak. Was it you who put laxative in Ariana's milk? Was it you who instigated me to resign Ariana's job? Then make her stay home to take care of you? Did you fall down the stairs yourself and then frame Ariana? Did you run away yourself? Then push all the blame onto Ariana? Stephen said word by word, finally biting his lip hard and glaring at Veronica. Why? Why did you do this? Because I like you, I want to be your wife, I want Ariana to divorce you. So, you bullied my wife like this? Yes. Slap, Stephen slapped Veronica hard on the face. This slap is for secretly changing Ariana's data. Slap, this slap is for giving Ariana milk with laxative. Slap, this slap is for instigating me to resign Ariana's job. Slap, this slap is for deliberately falling down the stairs and framing Ariana. Veronica was stunned by the slaps. She covered her face, looking at Stephen in disbelief. Stephen, have you gone mad? Why only blame me, why not blame yourself? You clearly promised to pick her up from work, but I tricked you with a few words, causing Ariana to get a fever. You clearly had a movie date with her, but I coaxed you to cook instead, and you said missing one movie doesn't matter. She was sick and hospitalized, yet you accompanied me swimming. Stephen, do you really like Ariana? Don't be a hindsight critic, you don't like her yourself. Otherwise, how could you be so blind? Everything I did, you tacitly approved. Hearing Veronica's words, Stephen suddenly laughed hysterically to the sky. You're right, I let her down, it's all me, blame me. So let's go accompany her in death. Stephen pressed Veronica down on the sofa, strangling her neck with both hands desperately. Veronica used her hands and feet, her sharp nails digging into Stephen's arms, but Stephen seemed oblivious to the pain. Veronica had no strength left, her hands kept grabbing, finally reaching the ashtray on the coffee table and smashing it on Stephen's head. Stephen loosened his grip in pain, and Veronica instinctively ran outward. The door was already locked by Stephen. Veronica couldn't open it, so she ran toward the room but was grabbed by Stephen. In their struggle, they reached the balcony. This was the 8th floor. Jumping down would mean death or disability. But Stephen seemed determined to die, wanting to drag Veronica to hell with him. Mad, you're mad. Stephen, you're mad. Yes, I'm mad, I am mad. Stephen lunged forward, pulling Veronica's hand, and both fell from the 8th floor balcony. One paralyzed, one disabled. I floated in the air, watching the chaotic scene and their endings, shaking my head. Love and hate like this is nothing more. But what does all this have to do with me? I've already been freed. Their bitter days have just begun.